It being 5:30 p.m., we will begin the Town of Bourne Board of Health meeting for Wednesday, November 13th, 2024. We are also have folks on Zoom participating. The Zoom chat will not be monitored. Participants who wish to speak must raise the hand icon until the chair asks them to unmute. Note this meeting is being televised and recorded by Bourne Community TV for replay. If anyone in the audience is also recording or videotaping, they need to acknowledge such at this time. All items within the meeting agenda are subject to deliberation and votes by the Board of Health. If anyone from the public wishes to access the meeting remotely, they can do so by clicking the Zoom link or by calling the following conference line on their phone and using the Zoom meeting ID and password below. The dial-in number is 1-309-205-3325. The meeting ID number is 315-403-5336, and the password is 02532. So calling the meeting to order. We'll take attendance. Miguel?
Here.
Yeah, Margaret Reale? Barbara Princiotti?
Yeah.
Bob Collette here. Dusty Meyer is absent. Okay. Main discussion this evening is to be number 2, 141 Williams Ave. Non-compliance with orders to correct dated March 15th, 2024 for violations of the state sanitary code 150 CMR 410-000 and non-compliance with Board of Health decision dated October 9th, 2024. We have some updates before us that I've had an opportunity to read. I don't know if any board members have any comments on those. I believe Mr. Bertram would like to speak regarding the directions for the next course of action for the town. Anybody from the board like to ask any questions or comment on any of the?
There was a report from, it says attached report with photos from the mold remediation.
So that was a part of your email that Dion sent you guys? So those are the
Access
same
online?
photos. Yes.
Okay, but it's not here.
I might have a copy that you can pass around as well.
Okay. Okay, so obviously the actions that were ordered by the Board of Health have not been completed in full. And Mr. Bertram, have you any suggestions or comments regarding where things should move from here?
Well, I can give you a framework, but that's, really your decision.
Yeah.
And I guess I'll start with what I've observed before, which is, this is probably not going to be the most satisfying of situations because, we can use the enforcement tools that are available to us, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everything is going to be corrected in short order. So I think we can start with, as I understand from the HVAC, I've seen, I guess, 2 contradictory emails now. The landlord is telling us that the HVAC work is done. I think the tenant has told us that it's not done. That's a factual issue that I guess we need to resolve. Sitting here, I can't tell you whether it's been done or not, but, I think the real question is potentially getting the town inspector back out there just to check on the work would be the easiest way to confirm whether or not that one's been done, and that's off the list. The basement door is an interesting issue to me. I know the landlord did try to have a repair person go out there. The reason I say it's interesting is because the sanitary code, the issue that we're addressing is a leak. So if the landlord can correct the leak by repairing the door, then arguably that should be sufficient for us. I know the order said to replace the door, but if the door does not need to be replaced and the leak can be corrected, that is really what the sanitary code is concerned with. So I do think that it would make sense to allow the landlord and to attempt to repair the door, whether it's weather stripping or sealing it. I'm not exactly sure what the issue is. I'm not a repairman myself, but if that does correct the leak, then I don't really see that we have the authority to order a new door at that point. You know, we're simply addressing the violation of the sanitary code. So, you know, that's sort of what I have to say about that issue. I think the mold is gonna be the hardest issue for us. You know, it does seem from that report that there are issues here, both factual and otherwise. I mean, the mold needs to be remediated. We know that to an absolute certainty. It's not safe for somebody to live in a home with mold. The way that the mold came back is a factual dispute, at least to some extent at this point. So in the basement, for example, there is a dehumidifier. If it's not being run, we can't really attribute that to the landlord. You know, the landlord has provided a mechanism to take the moisture out of the air that causes the mold, and so that is an issue that may potentially also rest with the tenant, although I think you should be interested in hearing what the tenant has to say about that. Some of the mold in the other areas of the house, again, it's really hard to figure out what the cause is. I know the report suggests that, you know, air conditioners need to be run. Maybe they've been run, maybe they haven't. There may need to be other mechanisms to remove moisture, particularly in the summer months when we all know that it's, you know, hot and humid on the Cape. But it does seem at this point that there is an issue there that has not been addressed and that the landlord's not willing to address because of the landlord's financial condition. So, you know, at this point, our options are, you know, if we're trying to figure it out, you know, we can continue to impose fines. That is a tool that you have. We can see if we can move to collect on those fines as an impetus to get the landlord to do something more. You know, so we can go to court. I'm not sure that a judge is going to have a better path than we are. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, a judge is going to be trying to deal with the same things. There is also a provision of the state sanitary code that does authorize the Board of Health to make, you know, to clean or make repairs itself under certain conditions, and then bill those back to a landlord. So I suppose that's something you could do too if you wanted. I'm not master of the money, so I don't really know where those funds would come from in the first instance. But that would be an option under the state sanitary code. But, you know, it seems that some progress has been made. I would say, you know, if we're going to separate the issues out, it seems that the HVAC is potentially done, although we should hear from the tenant and go from there. It sounds to me like the door can potentially be addressed and that we should consider a modification to our order to address the issue on the state sanitary code. And then finally, you know, the mold is the real issue, and, you know, we may end up having to engage in some enforcement on that. You know, the other issue to keep in mind is that there is an eviction proceeding against this tenant that is ongoing, and so we should monitor that. These very same issues may be decided by a judge in that court. I'm not suggesting that we should stop our enforcement actions or otherwise, you know, not do what we're supposed to do as a Board of Health. But I just, you know, wanted to make sure everybody's aware that there could be a judicial determination on some of the stuff down the road that may provide another data point. But that's kind of where we're at. And again, unfortunately, unless, you know, the board takes the option of doing the work itself, you know, we have tools where we can punish, we can try to prompt a landlord to do something, but it doesn't mean that the place is going to be fixed tomorrow. And I guess the other thing that I haven't mentioned is that, you know, we do have pictures of the mold. It may be, you know, the other thing we have to consider at this point is, do we need to send an inspector back out there and make a determination about whether this is fit for human habitation given the mold? Because if it's not, then we have an obligation to make a declaration to that effect too. And the reason I mention that is again, you know, mold is a health hazard. And while we have an inspection report by a third party that has, you know, given us documentation of the locations of the mold and has given us some photographs, it may be wise at this point to have somebody on our own staff go back out there and really give us a really good idea of what's going on. If it is declared unfit for human habitation, unfortunately the tenant would have to move. It's not a suggestion, well, it's not a suggestion I'm making at all at this point, you know, absent further information, but it would not be a great result, but it may be something that we have to do. So that's sort of the framework. I'm happy to help guide the board in further discussion, but it's certainly not an easy problem at this point.
Thank you. It's very frustrating at this point that the progress that we've been hoping for has not been achieved or reached. Any other comments from the board?
Yes, I have a
Miguel?
question for Mr. Bertrand, and as the counselor, see if you can advise us. You mentioned that we could order the repairs and then we will collect the fees from the owner. So what happens, can we actually order the repairs and start retaining the rent due to pay such repairs? Is that a legal recourse or no?
You know, I think that's great, sorry. Rob,
go ahead.
I think that's great you brought that up, because I wanted to ask a question about that too. Because you're right, if we collect from both sides, if we collect from the tenant the rent, or if we can, and if we're doing the repairs, if she's not paying the fines, how are we gonna collect the money? Can we put a lien on her house and foreclose if they don't pay? Because other than that, it doesn't make sense for the town to pay for the repairs if, one, we have no recourse. So, and it sounds like, you know, so do we have the ability to put a lien on the property if we do that, and foreclose on the property so that the town gets the property if they don't pay us? Because that's the only way, it seems like, I don't know. And then, because it sounds like declaring it unfit isn't gonna help anyway, it's not gonna help the tenant at all, because she's gonna have to move and she doesn't have a place to go, so it's like, I don't know. And then could the tenant do the repairs? I mean, she's not paying rent, but maybe, I don't know how much the repairs cost to remediate the mold. She does have the ability to pay for the repairs in lieu of rent. So maybe 1 month's rent would pay for the mold remediation and fixing the door, and the problem would be solved. That's all I'm thinking, like, I
No,
don't
I'm
know
just
how
saying
much-
1 month's rent.
I'm just saying, but she hasn't paid rent since February of
Right.
2024. So-
No, I don't
but-
disagree with you.
yeah, don't
I
know
was
how
just
much
saying it's
anything
gonna be
costs. So maybe we should-
expensive
So
to-
maybe we need to get pricing too of how much things are gonna cost before we really make a decision. But Brian, your question is if we do decide to go forward, what are the protections that the town has, like the lien on the property or things like that?
Well, I'm not sure the town has I mean, we would do it if we did that, and we would have to collect like anybody else collects. Honestly, I've not had occasion to get to that situation, so we can do a little research into exactly how that would work out, but
Yeah.
my suspicion is that you would be like any other, any other judgment creditor, so we end up paying legal fees to collect on the money, so we probably wouldn't end up being whole, right? You have to, in those kind of situations, you have to chase the money, and you have to
Yeah.
pay to chase the money, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
That's my concern, because we don't have much leverage without a lien in that situation. We haven't had any luck collecting any of the fines that have been levied to this point, and the owner doesn't seem willing to comply with any of that. So why would they comply with that sort of an order, if we did the repairs and then billed her?
And then.
I don't have confidence that we'd be able to recover the
Yeah.
investment.
But is the town able to put liens on the property for the fines though, Brian?
There would have to be judicial process first, I would imagine, you can't, I would have to go look at the Board of Health statutes, but my guess is that we would have to actually go to court in the first instance to attempt to collect the fines, and then from there, if we had a judgment, we could probably pursue the available mechanisms to do that. And that might include a lien, it might include other judicial mechanisms, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the short answer is if the board does want to start pursuing the fines, we can certainly flesh that out and do that. You know, it doesn't just stop because someone says, I don't want to pay the fines. There are ways to go and collect a judgment on somebody. You know, and the question, and I'd have to look into it for boards of health, is exactly how you go about that. But there are ways to do that. And that might be a way to put more pressure on the landlord. But sort of as I previewed at the beginning, it doesn't fix the problems. It does put more pressure on the landlord. It does, you know, it does make sure that the board, you know, is doing what it's supposed to be doing, but it's not going to fix the problems immediately.
Right. Katie, do you know the amount of the fine?
Yes.
A ballpark is fine, Katie, you don't have to look it up.
Like 88,000?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that would, if going, that might help us a little bit, because 88,000, I mean, we'd be able to foreclose if they didn't pay on that, and then that would, I guess, I think a judge would give it to us because it's been since so long. So, I don't know, maybe we should hear from the landlord first about what the issues are, or why they haven't done anything, or what they want to do.
Yeah,
I
I'd
don't
like to
know.
hear from both parties. if we
Yeah,
could.
I would say have the landlord maybe go
Yeah.
first, so we can see if they are going to fix the stuff or work with us, because if not, I don't know what to do at this point, except,
Okay, is there anybody here representing the landlord? Yes, sir. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Christopher Vieira. I'm an attorney with the law firm Dunning Crane, McNichols and Garner in Mashpee. I've been in front of this board at the prior meeting that resulted in the order that we're discussing here today. I was just curious, could we confirm if my client is on and can hear us? In case she might need to say something?
Okay, so Paula is here, yes.
Okay. Paula, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
and can we ask what Paula's last name is?
Hoffman.
Hoffman?
So not to completely, regurgitate the copy of the correspondence that I sent to Mr. Bertram's colleague, Mr. Riley, following a conversation that I had with him earlier this month. But from what I understand, as was relayed to me by my client, I personally have never been to the property, but Ms. Hoffman has advised me that the HVAC vendor did indeed go to the property at some point during the week of October 21st and completed the requested work. Whether or not there needs to be a final inspection, I leave that to to the board's decision. But Paula, can you confirm to the board that the HVAC vendor did indeed go to the property?
Yes, they did go to the property, and I've tried to contact them numerous times to get something definitive. I couldn't get past the secretary, but she said that they had contacted the Board of Health. I haven't been able to speak with the person I need to. He hasn't returned my calls, but I have been trying to pursue that. So I just know they were there, and the secretary told me they had contacted the Board of Health.
Okay, and is the HVAC vendor, is it a business called Cape Cod Heating and Air?
Yes, and then there's XL Mechanical, which does the actual work. They contract with them, apparently. But yeah, I had it initially done by the Cape Cod company, and then the subcontractor is the XL Mechanical.
Okay, but as we're, speaking right now, I mean, you are representing to the board that the HVAC vendor, pursuant to the order from last month, did indeed go to the property and performed the work that was requested, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, let's jump to the basement door.
I did, when it was initially suggested in the, initial reports, I did pay my contractor and he did, work with the sill. So I did pay for some work to be done to correct that way back in the beginning.
When you say way back in the beginning, what do you mean by that?
Like the initial, whatever, initial report.
You mean like back in March of earlier this year?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So now, again, just to kind of paraphrase what I reported to the town last week, was that you did contact, a general contractor that you use frequently at the property, right? A gentleman named Don Elder?
Yes.
Okay. And in order to address this issue with this basement door and the leaking surrounding this basement door, Mr. Elder advised that despite the fact that the order itself stated that the door needed to be replaced, it didn't necessarily need to be replaced to solve the problem. Isn't that right?
That's what he felt. We thought that it was fixed, and I did pay for it to supposedly be fixed. So I thought it was taken care of way back in the beginning. He's not sure what the problem is, but he can redo the seal. He felt the door was in good condition, and he just would take it out, reseal it, and do that. But he didn't feel it's only a couple years old.
The door itself.
Yeah.
Okay, and it would be more expensive to completely replace the door than it would be to
Well,
just...
absolutely.
Okay, then it would be to just seal it and stop the problem of the leak, correct? That's what
That's what he's telling me.
That's what Mr. Elder said. Okay, so
Yeah.
did you attempt to have Mr. Elder go to the property to attempt to remediate this leaking problem with the door?
Yes.
Okay, and then what happened?
Well, I think you got the text messages. The tenant wouldn't allow him to come on the property, or she would call the police, and she would only accept the full door replacement.
Okay. So Mr. Elder did not, in fact, address the door issue yet because the tenant would not allow him onto the property.
She said she would call the police on him if he showed up.
Okay. And is the reason why, or if you know, is the reason why the tenant refused to allow Mr. Elder onto the property was because Mr. Elder was offering to just seal the door as he recommended, as he believed that it was not necessary to completely replace the door, yet the tenant was focused on the word replacement in the order.
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay. All right, now let's talk about the mold, okay? You saw a copy of the report from Mold Pros, correct?
Yes, I did. I've had that house for 20 years and have never had the mold issue in the bedrooms as to what has developed in this single year that this particular tenant has been there. Maintaining the proper humidity level was a condition of her tenancy prior to her moving in. And I provided all the bedrooms with brand new units. They have a dehumidifier setting. The basement dehumidifier is working fine. And in our pre-tenancy inspection, she didn't claim any issues there. There were no issues. We haven't had issues. The house was in good condition. After she moved in, she told me that she would not pay for the electricity to run the dehumidifiers.
And so therefore, is it then, so you've owned this house for how long?
I rented it for 9 years and I purchased it in 2001 because my landlord gave me first refusal.
Okay. Now, prior to the current tenant, had you ever had any mold problems in this house?
In the basement, I had a tenant, a few years ago who, wouldn't run the dehumidifier. And at that time, before that tenant moved in, there was a, health department inspection, and I also did, the lead screening for it as well to be accepted into the housing program. So it was screened by the Department of Health prior to that tenant moving in, and I believe he intentionally did that to make some claims. And
Okay.
so we did a full remediation in the basement, and I've stayed in touch with Mold Pros and had them, they've checked in on the house regularly as I have been renting it because I never wanted to go back there again. So over the years since the remediation, they have checked in on it regularly to make sure that we were staying on top of things.
Okay. Paula, have you personally lived in this property? You have, right?
Yes, I lived there until 1993 to 2006.
Okay. And I know you're not a mold expert. Nobody's here even implicating that you are. But just from your personal
Well, Well, I had to maintain the proper humidity level, but there was no problem.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get at, Paula. Let me just finish my question. So,
I'm sorry.
in your personal experience, had you ever noticed any problems with mold so long as the humidity levels were controlled properly in the home?
Yeah, none. In fact, the dehumidifier wouldn't even have to run, but 3 to maybe 4 hours a day at the worst of it, which is why I actually provided a timer on the cord for that basement dehumidifier, and I had it set so it would run like maybe 3 hours a day. And that was enough to maintain what I was told was a 70% humidity since they did the first remediation down there. So running just a few hours a day on the timer, it would maintain that 70%.
Okay, well then, so then is it your contention then that the cause of the mold is that the humidity level is not being, is not being, excuse me, is not maintaining the level that would be necessary to keep the mold away because of the current occupant?
Absolutely.
Okay, and
She
that's,
told me she wouldn't pay for it.
and
She
she
wouldn't pay for the electricity.
didn't want to pay the additional electric bill
Yes.
by running the dehumidifier?
Yes, even though I told her it wasn't that bad. I live in Florida. I know humidity, and
Okay.
it's not that difficult to control.
Now, besides the basement, there are also other humidity control units in the main, other areas of the main living areas of the house?
Yes, in each of the bedrooms, which was able to actually control the whole upstairs, not just the bedrooms. And those only needed to run, just an hour or so here and there, but having the 3 bedrooms with the door open, it can maintain everything. Not even with all of the units running.
Okay, so then once again, is it your contention that the current occupant is not running those properly, and therefore causing the humidity levels to rise and leading to the mold?
Absolutely, and she accepted the house, and there was no issue with that. She didn't notice anything, and she accepted the house.
Okay. Did you, Paula, did you see, at the very, do you by any chance have a copy of the Mold Pros report from October 23rd?
Oh, I do, but not in my hands.
Not in front of you, okay. But
Yeah.
there were certain recommendations that this Mr. Ken Herman,
Yeah,
I can't even pronounce his last name. There were some certain recommendations that he made, correct?
yeah, she felt that the bedrooms needed to be remediated. He felt, the attic, didn't need to be addressed immediately. He didn't feel like that was an extensive problem so far. He felt it was completely separate from the living area. and felt that it could wait until I could be on the property and look with him and be able to manage and move things. I'm not able to pay the kind of price I would have to move everything out at this point. I have had expenses from the hurricane, which have been difficult as well. So
Okay.
the hurricane took my power pole down and I've been without, power and water for 3 weeks. So,
And is it also true that the tenant has not paid any rent since the month of February of earlier this year?
she's paid through January. She paid 2 weeks in October, and I didn't get anything else till a partial the end of November, and then I didn't get anything else till the end of January piecemeal, but only after I got you involved. And when you became involved, I got a couple payments, which added up to covering through the end of January.
Okay, so, but when you say October, and you mean 2023?
Yes,
Okay, but there has not been a payment made since January of 2024?
correct.
Okay, and does that make it difficult without that
Oh my
income?
God. It's completely ruined my life financially.
Okay, can you
If I
explain?
could write a check and satisfy all of this, I would be happy to, but I'm afraid for her being in the house and have me do the work without her supporting.
Okay, so is it then also your contention then that any of these recommendations by the mold pros right now, you just simply financially cannot afford to implement?
Yes,
Now,
that's exactly what it is.
Okay.
It's not lack of a desire, but I can talk to him further and get some quotes on that and look into that further to see where we stand with that.
Now, but that would be beyond just the mere hope that the tenant would run the dehumidifier properly in the basement and the other units in the living areas of the house, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, the situation has already proven itself to me.
Okay. Does the board have any questions?
No, it seems like it's just the same tug of war that's been going on for a long time now. We've got all that information. It's very similar. It hasn't changed much at all.
Right.
I'd welcome any comments from Julie if you have any. Or, okay. Hold on.
one second.
Excuse
I
me
just
one
made a comment on a
moment.
couple
Kate.
of things. The HVAC company, we did confirm that they were out there. They did come not on the date that was scheduled, that we were aware of. They came before Dion went out there. They called for inspection with the plumbing inspector, but did not show up for that inspection. So the plumbing inspector has not been able to get a hold of them and verify that the work was done correctly and completely. So that permit is still outstanding with the plumbing department, well, the building department. What was the other things? As for the basement door, as Brian said, potentially we could modify that order and say, instead of replace, it can be repair, replace, as long as it's watertight. Dion might be able to speak more to this. He had a conversation either via email or on the phone with the contractor at one point during the original repairs, and he noted that the door itself was deteriorated from the leak and that it needed to be replaced. So that's initially why we brought that before you guys. If that's not the case, we can definitely inspect that and see if it's can be repaired versus replaced. But based off of the conversation that Dion had, we were under the understanding that it needed to be replaced. I think those are the only things I wanted to provide comment on so far.
And then if Dion's giving comment, can he just comment on when he did, is Dion's the only one that has been to the property?
Yep, go ahead, Dion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the call. This is Dion. So regarding the door, I believe it was July of this year, he had gone out again to inspect the door, and it was the seal. He said that was rotted out due to constant water contact and water flowing down from the roof and pooling up into the track was deteriorating the seal on the door. So in the email that he said it was difficult to really say with certainty what was rotted out. But over the phone, he did say that, you know, the whole door should probably be replaced, but he probably meant, he could have meant that just the seal around the door needed to be replaced. I was present for the Mold Pros inspection. You know, as far as the attic, he made a distinction between the two types of mold, so black mold versus surface mold. He was not able to find any black mold in pulling up the insulation. He did say that there were a couple of areas he couldn't access because of the things in the attic. And his report pretty much dittos what I observed on each of the bedrooms as far as the surface mold due to high levels of humidity, and also in the basement. The AC units, the occupant says that she does run them, you know, on the dry setting. And he says that if that is the case, if they are being run, then they're just not pulling enough humidity out of the air. Now, you know, we're not there 24 hours a day. We don't know if they're being run, but if they are, they're not pulling enough humidity out of the air. So, what else?
The size
would
of
not-
the unit,
Excuse me.
Paula, hold on.
No, go ahead, Paula.
the size of the units are rated for a larger room than that, so it should be plenty.
Okay. And again, you know, we're not there to know if they're being run.
Yeah.
I'm simply stating that if they are being run, then they are not pulling enough humidity out of the air, if they're being run. Yeah, so I can't confirm that. They are. But yes, but I was there, Mr. Bertrand, I was there, and I did write up a report and I sent it to the board as well. And it pretty much lines up with what Mold Pros had written in their report.
Dion, when you were there,
The-
oh, sorry, I thought you were done. Apologies.
Yeah, no, the plumbing inspector did receive a call from the HVAC company. When I returned to the office, I inspected the property on October 23rd. When I returned to the office, the plumbing inspector said that he was scheduled to meet with the HVAC company that day on the site, but I guess they weren't there when he arrived. And he had not been able to contact them to find out why they weren't. So that's all I know about the final inspection for the HVAC work.
Dion, when you were there, were the dehumidifiers being run in any of the rooms? Were any of the 4 dehumidifiers being run?
There's only one dehumidifier. They're window units. The window units were running. The master bedroom has a lot of surface mold on in the closet and on clothing and on lampshades. The back front bedroom also has surface mold in the closet. The front middle room has no visible mold. You can still smell it just from the moisture in the air. But those units were being run when we were there for the inspection.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Questions, comments from the board?
Is that including the dehumidifier? The air conditioners and the dehumidifier were all in operation while you were there, Dion?
But the dehumidifier was not on, but the dehumidifier has a hose. And again, the contractor hired to make repairs to the door, or take a look at the door, said that one of the reasons why the seal deteriorated was because the hose had been run beneath the door, and recommended that it be expelled through the wall of the home.
Right.
Installed, to drain through a hole in the wall or through a drain inside of the home, as opposed to being stuffed underneath the door. But that dehumidifier was not running when I was there.
I didn't see the report, so I was wondering if Mold Pros recommended any of these units being replaced with completely different type upgraded units, such as the dehumidifier, another, instead of like changing how the water's disposed of, did they just recommend a different dehumidifier?
I can
He's-
read, Dion, I can
okay.
read off the 4 recommendations that they left at the end of that report.
Okay.
So recommended actions: have a functioning dehumidifier running in the basement that drains outside, either by installing drainage line to the existing dehumidifier or install a new unit with a drainage line. Run an air polishing machine in the basement for 1 day to improve air quality and reduce potential airborne mold spores. Perform a surface mold remediation in the 2nd affected bedrooms on the main level and run an air polishing machine in the area outside of these rooms to improve air quality and reduce potential airborne mold spores. For ongoing prevention, look into humidity control in the main levels.
So Katie and Dion, apologies, but they're using window AC units to mitigate, why
Versus-
why aren't they using dehumidifiers? Why are they using ACs?
Because you don't need to have drainage for it.
But again, it's not, I mean, I'm saying I use that in my house, and, they don't fill up that often. You empty it, the cost is so negligible. You just empty it outside. or
I
you
think it
just dump in
functions
the
as both
sink.
the air conditioning and the air, so
But
air cooling and air conditioning. So
And
it's for the summer months to cool the home, and
instead of
also
having
it's a
two
conditioning
things.
unit, yeah. Because there's no central air in the home.
Yeah, and I guess that's how my house is too. I have
Yeah.
window ACs, but I also have a dehumidifier
Gotcha.
separate, and I just empty it when it fills up. Okay, all right, thank you, I just didn't understand that fully.
Paula, one last question, if I may.
Sure. Go right
The
ahead.
dehumidifier in the basement, does it have the ability, does it fill up with moisture in like a bucket that could just be easily taken out and just dumped out?
Oh, yeah, it works that way,
Okay.
yeah. It's got a little handle on it, you pull it out, you dump it, yeah.
Okay, so that could be an alternative, that if whoever is occupying the
yeah.
space could just empty the bucket in lieu of having a hose drain out to the exterior, right?
Yeah, it doesn't have to have the hose,
Okay.
and it's easy to maintain, and my previous tenants maintained the house, so I know it can be maintained.
One last, just kind of bit of housekeeping for the board
Yes,
before
sir.
I can, if you have any other questions, before Attorney Alva speaks on his client's behalf. Mr. Bertram is correct, and I think that you folks are already aware of the fact that there is an eviction proceeding that is in process. Tomorrow, as a matter of fact, there is a case management conference to determine the trial readiness of the case. Don't know when we're going to get a date. We have not had any successful settlement negotiations in terms of regaining possession back from the tenant. And I would just say, as far as the fines are concerned, my client, as she just described to you, is in terrible financial dire straits at the moment. So, I mean, fines can be levied until the cows come home. She just simply does not have the ability to pay them. And part of that reason may be because she can't get in compliance with this board because of her contention is the tenant is not properly maintaining the home in the first place. Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
No, thank you. I'm good.
I just have a question for Katie, if that's okay, since you have that
Barbara.
mold report.
Yeah.
So the mold people are saying it's surface mold, not black mold.
Correct, yes.
So did they recommend anything on cleaning the surface mold, like using bleach, like?
They
being
did not
done,
put
or is
that
it just-
in their report what would be used, but they just said surface mold remediation. And they would provide quotes on it.
Excuse me, Paula?
I-
Paula?
Ma'am,
Yeah,
You need to wait, Paula, you need to wait until we're finished discussing and wait till
Okay, forgive me.
we ask for it.
I'm
No,
sorry.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they didn't specify what would be used. Obviously, we're not asking, the tenant to do the cleaning herself.
Yeah, I was
But
just-
those remediation techniques are available, for what would be your cleaning products.
Okay,
Recommendations
alright.
are available, from DEP, all that stuff, so.
Okay, thank you.
Right, but that doesn't solve the problem of the recurring, recurring mold.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I think just relative to the machine, the dehumidifier that's in the basement now, sounds like it might be a bit of an older unit, not as efficient as the ones that we had asked to be installed, which will come on automatically when the humidity level reaches a certain point in the basement or in the air, wherever it happens to be situated, and comes on for a period of time until the proper level of humidity is reached. So it's not a matter of personally, manually turning the machine on and off or trying to set it and estimate when the, how long it should run for and then having to empty it out daily and all of that.
Yep.
It's a much more efficient and in the long term, cost-effective because you wouldn't be saddled with the situation that exists there now with continuous mold growing throughout the home that has to be remediated and all of the other associated problems with it. And that's the type of unit that we asked to have installed during the last order that we placed, and that has been ignored. And as far as the door goes, I'd like to go along with the recommendation that was made back in July that the door be replaced. It wasn't the prerogative of whoever went over to try to fix the door or decide whether or not to replace it. It wasn't their decision to do so. We asked to have the door replaced. It wasn't done. So, to me, that's wrong. And I welcome any other comments to those points, but from the board.
I want to wait until the tenant speaks before any comments.
Anybody from the audience?
I'm Attorney Anthony Alva. I represent Julie Ball in the home. And thank you for your time here. I'm not going to take up that much time. First off, when it comes to findings of fact, it really is up to the inspector. I've spoken to Dion once, maybe even twice, but several months ago, and I just listened. I didn't ask. He explained in detail the conditions we found there. His report speaks for itself. The one item, and Dion, if you're still on the line, correct me if I don't remember correctly here, but it is basically, he had informed me that the leak from the roof was very, very bad. The word I recalled was flood. And it fits in with what my client said. I don't want to get into a situation where you get a lot of self-serving comments about facts. It's up to your inspector to find that, so we would leave that to you today. I'll give credit to Attorney Vieira there, those leading questions. Boy, he wouldn't get very far in court with that. but be that as it may, Julie's lived it. She's here to address certain facts at the best. But I think I can give some background, having dealt with some of these cases in the past, what the board's authority is under General Law, Chapter 111. I've had situations where my client landlords have faced a potential receivership from the town for failing to abide by Board of Health orders of the court. There are certain statutes that can be brought. I've had to represent my clients, some landlord clients, on contempt issues where the town has brought criminal complaints or civil complaints that could lead to eventually placing a property in receivership. So those are some. It's a very, very detailed area, and it's a very, very specialized area. But the town does have authority to do that under General Law, Chapter 111. We have the ability, too, to bring a lawsuit in certain circumstances to have a receiver appointed for the property by going to court, but that's an extreme step. My client, she's trying to find another place to go, and it has been for a long time, and we're just trying to address the situation. I would like to point out the eviction case. This is the second one. The first one was dismissed. And go back to some of the background situations here on this matter. Okay. It's my understanding from my review of the record that my client provided, and that's in the court, these problems have been existing for a long time, and I don't want to retread a lot of information which board members are probably familiar with, but there was a Jamie Peterson who the landlord, Ms. Hoffman, attempted to evict back in 2019, just before COVID came about. They reached an agreement, and it's my understanding that the board back then had issued certain orders to the landlord that the place was not to be re-rented until the corrections were made. And he cites the same things that we have now: excessive moisture, chronic dampness resulting from structural issues, and I'm just reading from his claim here, and defective windows. Essentially, the rot and structural damage to the exterior, not watertight. These are really some of the basic problems that my client has been facing in the property. On rent, that's a red herring. That's really not a Board of Health issue. My client was paying rent. In fact, in the last case that ended up getting dismissed, the landlord couldn't tell us how much rent had been paid. We produced the documents to show what was done. It was actually reversed. Because they couldn't tell us, we kept getting different numbers from Julie Hoffman, or Ms. Hoffman, and that was the situation in those circumstances. There are a couple of major issues here that I didn't hear addressed that Julie has brought to my attention, and that is the deck. It's my understanding the deck is still condemned. It's my understanding there were no gutters on the back of the house, which might lead to that condition, so it's a dangerous situation for them. And the door, I think the board has pretty much addressed about the rot in the door. My client was indicating to me that door is actually rotted. I will finish by saying this, and then if you have anything to add, Julie, by way of fact, just to address it, is that my client is always under strict instructions from the very beginning. You must cooperate with the Board of Health, you must cooperate with the inspectors, you must cooperate with all of the individuals who need to go to the home to make any and all repairs. So the suggestion that she's not cooperating and the like, she's got strict instructions. That is something that she is to do. And I know there have been numerous times when she's come there and been surprised to find people there. A landlord doesn't have an unbridled right to come to a home, but we do have an obligation at law to cooperate, and that's what has been doing. And that's what she'll continue to do until she finds a place to move. You know, in these circumstances, it's not a question of if a tenant is going to move; it's just a question of when. And hopefully, you know, Attorney Vieira indicated that the settlement negotiations; those are always a potential that something might be done in that regard. In fact, the last case with Mr. Peterson, the landlord did reach Ms. Hoffman did reach an agreement with him, essentially based upon the uncorrected conditions of the Board of Health. That was pretty favorable for Mr. Peterson. So, having said that, we could go on for a long time about issues on bullet points on the defects that were found by the Board of Health that still haven't been corrected. But if there's anything major that you would like to add, Julie, I would yield to you at this time.
Oh, well, I'm just going to bring up again, your final order on the 10th of October was that the basement door be replaced as an entirety, and it was not. It's not been touched. I've been called or texted that he was going to come seal it. There was no call for the police. When I said I was going to call the police is when they were going to board me in like an animal and board up the sliding back door, so we need to be clear on that. This woman has also been told to replace that dehumidifier in the cellar that is too old to use, that one needs to be professionally installed, and she has not done so. This has been said to her by the original HVAC company that installed the new furnace system in 2019, in which she had never cleaned nor serviced in all of these years since 2019. They told her to install a dehumidifier system into that whole system, and she refused. The reason the dehumidifier, is not being used is the contractor, Don Elder, told me to not use it. It is too old. It is draining out the door. It needs to be replaced. The door is wood and it is rotten. And I believe Mr. Wills can also speak to the fact of a reinspection midsummer. He came into the house and found more water after Don, the contractor, had been to do his so-called work. There was still water coming into the house. This is a continual problem. The window units are used. To tell me anywhere otherwise is wrong. They are being used. I have followed every direction that I have been told to do by the Board of Health, by Dion Wills, by any contractor. Every contractor who has called me has been let in and done the work. As far as the HVAC, they've done some of the work. It was not completed, in which you also know your plumbing inspector has not been back to finalize inspection. Dion did notice the work that has not been completed and notated that. Dion's been in this house since March. His very first words to me was, I was in a very sick house with a very evil landlord, and I need to get out. The prior tenants also have a very sick child with asthma due to this house and due to the mold. As far as the rent issue, again, they are lying. It is also not to be in front of the Board of Health. That is not the issue. I'm not paying for her repairs. In her statement on July 29th, she told all of you that she was coming into a large sum of money in September and she would fix the house, in which she still did not do. Every single time you guys pass an order or demand and give her time limits to finish, to complete, and or you will condemn the house or make it uninhabitable, she doesn't care. And I believe Mr. Wills can also testify and state to you that he has called many times, called, emailed with no reply, non-compliance as an entirety. She has stated to the contractor she will not replace the deck until she throws this bitch, her words, not mine, into the street on her ass. She has no intention to fix this house until I'm removed. The mold in the house, do you actually think that I want to live in a house full of mold?
Of course not.
You have to be joking.
Well, thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, I appreciate your comments.
So
Comments from
I
the
have
board?
some comments.
Yes.
I have some comments. Am I on? Yes. And so a question to Mr. Bertrand, and the comments are like, we're not here to determine if a party is guilty or not. I guess our scope of authority here is to see if the codes are being met or not, and if we will declare that this dwelling is fit for habitation, if this was not happening, if it was going to be rented, can be rented like this in this state. And so that would be my comment. And the question to Mr. Bertrand is, based on the report from Mr. Wills saying that there was significant mold in the house, so that has been done. And we read the report, Michelle read the report from the remediation company and what they were recommending. So do we have the legal requirements to make a determination if the house is fit for habitation or not?
So there's certain, I think that you could definitely view these facts as potentially reaching that, satisfying the requirements for that. I would say there's sort of a threshold issue if you want to go down that path, which is under the state sanitary code. There's certain procedural requirements. There's a notification you have to give to the occupant or the owner before you do that. So I can help, draft up something like that, but I would suggest you couldn't necessarily do that tonight without that notice. So you probably have to have another meeting to do that. So that would be one potential option that you could pursue, though, if you think that it's bad enough. The consequences of that are that the tenant would no longer be able to live there. I believe that we do provide sort of relocation assistance in the form of moving funds, but we don't, no one pays for another place. So if that order issued, the tenant would have to leave and the tenant would be responsible for finding a new residence. I'm not suggesting that should stop you from doing it. Obviously, you have to, as you observed, you have to enforce the code and you have to make determinations under the code, but that would be the consequence of that. And if that's something you're considering, then we should issue the proper notice, schedule a meeting for that, and the board could consider doing that.
So, Brian, no, actually, we're deliberating, so please refrain. So Brian, on the flip side, there's two sides to every story. It seems like we don't have 100% of the facts. It's kind of like a he said, she said game at this point. Like, we don't know, because we're not there 24/7. So are we able to, and then we know repairs have to be made. We know there's a new dehumidifier that wasn't purchased. We know somebody needs to professionally install it, and we know the door needs to be replaced and repaired.
And
So-
the deck. some, stuff
But-
about the deck stuff.
But the deck, I don't think is, but the deck, we've already been told is fine, is basically, there's another egress. So the deck is
Right.
like a minor issue compared to the inside.
Right.
Like if you just focus on these two things, like she's living inside the house, she's not gonna, it's winter now, okay, but she's living inside the house. Like, can we say, like, we don't even know how much these things cost. She said she paid before $3,100 in rent. Can't we say, fix it? You wanna live there, fix it. And then just don't pay, she's not paying rent anyway, people can fix things, wouldn't that just solve it?
I mean, if,
Like, I don't understand why that's not happening, and it's just surface mold, it's surface mold, I mean, you get that in your bathroom, in the shower, that's surface mold, it's not like it's black mold. I mean, every mold is bad, I'm not saying, every mold is bad, but the surface mold is removable. Black mold is like like inside. So if the surface mold can be cleaned, and then, I don't know.
There's some
just-
validity to that, but
Yeah.
I'm concerned about the long-term negligence that appears to be, the pattern for the landlord,
Oh,
of
I
the
agree
property.
with
And I
that.
agree, it's
I'm just trying to fix
long-distance
her
owner.
problem
Yeah.
immediately so she can live there.
Right, but if it's only short-term, how long does she have to keep paying for maintenance and that kind of thing?
Oh, I would
If she
just
starts
say,
paying rent again?
oh, yeah, I would just say, see if we can, this is only for the mold and the other thing.
Yeah.
That's it. Because then at least she can live inside and feel like she can breathe the air. Like, these two things are what's making her
Yeah.
not being able to, breathe inside. But I wouldn't say she should always repair it, because that's not her house.
Right.
Like, the landlord definitely has responsibility. But I like the idea of figuring out, maybe pursuing those collections to force her hand.
we can do that, you can vote to ask us to go to court to enforce. I mean, I previously suggested we could do that, we can seek an injunction, we can seek, some kind of relief. As Attorney Alva pointed out, there is the possibility of receivership, under the statutes. It's in Chapter 111, I can't remember the specific section. I don't think a court would do that lightly or swiftly, but it would be a possibility down the road too. These are all options, and these are all things that we can do if the board wants to do them. And I don't want to sound like a broken record, these things are gonna take time. Part of the focus here has been trying to find a path that got things fixed for the benefit of the tenants. And maybe that path is longer and it goes through court, I don't know. So.
There you go.
So this is not the first time we meet about this property, and we have this discussion. I remember talking when we mentioned September, and it looked pretty far away to live in a house that is potentially unsafe for the people living there. Now we're in November.
Right.
No issues have been really met based on what we said in those meetings. So I'm just concerned about the safety of the tenants. I'm not saying that the tenants are doing the right things either, but I just don't see any movement. If we make a motion to meet again, what's gonna happen then? Nothing has happened in months.
Right.
So I think from my perspective, my responsibility here is to make sure that the place is fit for habitation or not, and if it is not, then we just have to declare it.
Well, excuse me.
I just wanted to ask,
Yeah, Paula, we're deliberating, so you'd have to wait until we call on you.
Okay.
I wanted to ask Brian if Julie opted to take the funds that she has not paid in rent and use that to remediate the house, make it livable, would she be covered legally? In other words, would there be any grounds for eviction if that was what she used the money on?
I have to be a little careful here because I'm an attorney for the board, so I can't really, advise or say what she can do.
Okay.
I mean, in tenant law, there are certainly options available to tenants to withhold rent or to do self-repair. But whether that's advisable or whether they want to do that,
Right.
it's really board's authority to tell them either. Attorney Alva may want to speak to it, but I just, I think that whether she does that or not is really not relevant to what the board's duty is, which is to discharge its own regulatory duty.
Okay.
So is it, what are the requirements for unfit, like the full requirements? Do we even know every one of those? Like, we need a
Right, yeah.
list. I think we need to probably do, I hate to say this, but we need to know what all of the requirements are for a place to actually be unfit. Because I would say then you can condemn my house too at the same time. Everybody, for the mold in my son, for the stuff, my son not cleaning the shower for a week. It's like.
No, right. I
And
mean,
there is a vast difference between finding something unfit for human habitation and condemning it. There are
Right,
two different
yes.
statutes
So I
there.
think do we have the statute?
So, finding a residence, or portion of a residence unfit for human habitation, is on the basis of the inspector. Conditions that are deemed to impair are specifically listed within the housing code, so the state sanitary code. Resident unfit for human habitation, there's nothing specifically definitive of what that means. It is under the interpretation of the person inspecting the dwelling. In
Yeah,
portions of-
just to back you up there, Caitlin,
Yeah.
it shall mean a violation which poses such immediate harm or threat of harm to an occupant or to the public that other legal remedies cannot be reasonably expected to bring about removal of the condition with sufficient speed to prevent serious harm or injury to the occupants or to the public. So that is a condition making a unit unfit for human habitation. That's the definition in the state sanitary code.
Okay, so I think this falls a little short of that. There are remedies that we can employ, certainly. But, I'm more in favor of moving this to court at this point. It's just become such a source of frustration. There's no movement from either side, really, any meaningful movement. I understand Julie's situation, but we haven't had any luck enforcing or motivating Ms. Hoffman to do what we've required her to do fully to this point. And, my suggestion, I would lean toward moving it into the court, even though it's going to protract the whole situation for everybody, but at least they would have a little bit more leverage than we do. That's just my opinion. Margaret, did you have any? Barbara?
Yeah, I agree. We're just not getting anywhere. It would be great, I know it would be great to be able to get some of these things done. And it would be, and I don't know if.
It would be so simple.
Yeah, so I don't know if the tenant, if they're willing to at least do the things so that they can live in the place, because if we do the unfit for thing, then she's gonna be out in the street.
Well,
We'll pay for relocation, but she has no place to relocate, otherwise she would have already relocated. So the only thing is if the landlord isn't doing the inside stuff, which is like the immediate thing that needs to be, all those two things, it's like
right,
you
but she's
can't force
being,
anybody to do
she's
anything.
being evicted,
I know.
they're trying to
Right,
evict
and then
her.
that would, maybe if the landlord agrees
There
not
would
to
have to be a
evict.
written agreement.
Yeah, so some written agreement between those
I don't know if
attorneys,
that's
I
a
don't know.
possibility.
I don't think we can order that, but I think maybe if they agree, I don't know. I think it
Yeah.
would depend on if Paula says, yeah, sure, I can't do it, you do it, and then won't evict you, and then you can stay there.
Well, let's see, what's,
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe they need to hash it out.
well, Julie, would you like to respond, would you like to, please step up to the podium if you'd like to say something about that? If you think it's even a possibility, or what your thoughts are on something like that.
Yeah.
Back in July 30th, it was your ruling, Board of Health's ruling, under the Sanitation Code 105 CMR 410. If you guys go back to that order, you gave her very strict limitations to handle everything in the house, including the mold and the deck. And she has been non-compliant. So you give her time limits
Right.
until you would make the house uninhabitable. I'm not going to pay to have the house free of the mold, and it's not just surface mold in the bathroom, so I really don't like that you're minimizing it.
I'm just reading
Okay.
what the
Well,
report says, so that's all
You've seen
I
the
can go
photos,
by.
ma'am.
again,
You've seen the
but
photos.
report
And none of you would like to live in this house, okay? I live in this house. I would love to leave this house. I can't. I'm not fixing her problems that she's had since 2019 and not been in compliance with the Board of Health, ever. The deck still stands fully condemned, fully condemned. And I get that the building inspector or the building code says that my second egress is a 12-foot jump, even though 2 fire chiefs says that's not possible. Somebody jumping that far will die.
Right. But
So
that's
you guys
not-
are
those aren't
still
the
missing the
specific
entire
issues that we're
point.
addressing this evening. So
You
we've
you
narrowed
guys
it down
have
to
given
these.
her
Deck has been
time
condemned
limits,
either.
time after time
Right.
after time, and she
Right.
has ignored you.
Right, so this is,
And
this
that's why he's
is
saying go to court.
why I'm saying I think I'd like to, not like, I don't want to pass the buck on to anybody, but we haven't had any impact on the movement that we've been seeking here towards a resolution. And so if we have to bump it up the ladder, if you will, then that's what we'll do. That's what I would like to see happen. You know, I don't see any other reasonable solution at this point. We
Do you
don't.
remember her stating she was getting a large sum of money at the end of
Yeah.
July and would fix all of this in September?
Right, yes, I do. We have it all on record, and I do recall in this.
In which she lied. She didn't fix the problems.
Okay.
So why am I going to fix her problems with this problematic
I
house?
could just
Understood. Thank
bring
you.
that- We don't know what it would cost. There's no provision in law. There's what's called a repair and deduct statute that a tenant does have a limited right to not pay rent and make repairs, but it's very, very limited.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a carte blanche that a government agency or anyone would be
Right.
ordering a tenant to pay for the
No,
repairs.
no, it
Right,
wouldn't be
yeah,
an
we're
order,
not
it was just
ordering that, we were just,
Yeah.
yeah.
suggesting that this might be a,
We were
exploring
exploring
a possibility,
options.
that's all, just throwing it out there. So, anybody else, make a suggestion, or,
I guess if we can't do that, I guess that would
I
be,
mean, it doesn't rise to the level of
Okay.
unfit for human habitation,
then let it-
so,
But yet you wouldn't live in it.
right. But from a legal standpoint, that would not favor you, Julie. So, you know, that could go back
Right.
against you, you don't want that. So I'm sure Mr. Alba would tell you. So, Brian, how would you, what is the proper wording for the motion to move this to?
I think you can just vote to authorize town council to seek enforcement of the board's orders in court. And, you know, I can work with the health department from there.
Okay. Anybody care to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to authorize town council to enforce the board's orders and work with the health department on that for 141 Williams Ave.
Can I get a second? We have a second.
second.
Margaret, second. Miguel?
Aye.
And Bob? Aye. Okay. Thank you. I'm sure both of you, all of you folks will be hearing from Katie and maybe from Mr. Bertram at some point in the near future, but I wish you both luck in moving forward and hope we come to some kind of reasonable resolution. Okay? We tried to help you guys. All right?
Thank you for your consideration.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Okay.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I don't get to speak?
No, you
Well,
don't.
here,
We're already
the
finished.
meeting is over. I'm sorry, Paul. Thank you.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, go right ahead.
I second that.
Second. Okay.
Aye.
Margaret, aye. Bob, aye. Barbara, aye. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.